All right.
All right, we've 10:30 at night. We got to do this.
I know. Let's go.
New terror loosed upon a startled world. Son of Frankenstein was the film that we watched tonight. Welcome back once again to the channel and to Cinema Revisited, the Universal Monster Movies. I am once again joined by none other than my esteemed co-host, DJ, and we're going to talk a little bit about Son of Frankenstein, specifically the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic of this classic 1938 film. And we'll also talk a little bit about what we would do if we had to reshoot it for the time to make it a little bit better, and how we would bring this to a modern audience.
Oof.
So with that, DJ, let's begin with the good, in your opinion.
For the good, I would say the character escalation between Frankenstein and the detective.
Okay.
The whole film, most of what happens without them in it is either boring or kind of odd, but the two of those on screen has the vibes of, well, I would say, yeah, the vibes is a good term for it. It kind of has the vibes that I got off of Dracula and Van Helsing. It's another good dynamic. A really good, solid dynamic between two characters that play really well off of each other. The tension's really high. They both have ulterior motives. They have their secrets. You can tell that he's plotting against Frankenstein. Frankenstein's plotting about the monster, and they know each other's up to something, and they just constantly escalates throughout the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree.
Passive aggressively.
Oh, yeah, passive aggressively. I do have to agree with you though. Like, I have the same thing for good. The dynamic of all the characters, how they play off of each other, is really well done. The acting is fairly believable. There's a couple of scenes that aren't super great necessarily, but overall they play off of each other really well. They're believable as characters, and they make the film interesting. So I agree. That also is my good, is just the dynamic of all the characters. Those two specifically,
but yes, a lot of the character, the husband wife are way more believable as a couple than his father and his wife was. The original two Frankensteins, they don't really have that. Like in the first one, it almost feels like, why does she even care about him? Like,
yeah, like she had better chemistry. If I remember right, our notes were that she had better chemistry with her childhood friend.
That is correct.
Which is a theme that carries on into
with Victor, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's a theme that carried on into Werewolf of London as well. We had the same note where the female lead had better chemistry with the childhood friend character than their actual love interest. In this one, they're believable as a married couple. They play off each other relatively well. They don't have many scenes together, I will say. Most of the scenes are between Frankenstein and Igor, and Frankenstein and the inspector.
Yep.
So what little screen time we do have, though, it's a relatively believable marriage between the husband and the wife character.
And the child is adorable.
The child is adorable. Although
his lines, he's like 5 times in the movie, he's like, "Hello, you."
Hello there. Hello, Inspector.
Hello, General, sir.
Yeah, exactly. He calls him General. Sorry.
He's so freaking adorable and hilarious.
Yeah, he is a very adorable kid.
I think it's the first time in any of these films they had like a child, I think, really at all front and center. Well, a lot of them had children in them, but the little girl
from Frankenstein was probably the only one that actually had lines.
But this one was pretty. Yeah, this was pretty. This is the most lines I've seen from a kid in these films.
Yeah, he did pretty well too. Okay, let's move on to bad. What's a bad thing? Not ugly, but bad.
The pacing. Like,
Yeah.
This one is longer than any of the ones we've watched, and it didn't feel like it needed to be that long. It felt like you could have easily cut 40 minutes out of this film and it would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really good scenes in the movie spaced with these large moments where nothing really happens or repetitive stuff happens. There's a lot of repetition where they film things later that with expositional scenes that explain what's already been explained in another scene. They focus really hard, like the butler being missing is a main plot point for like 25 minutes of the film for when he's finally found. It's helping build tension, but I feel like they could have focused on other things. Yeah. That kind of stuff. Just a lot of misdirection, misfocus, bad timing, just the pacing in general, just really rough.
I agree with you on that too. There's a lot of filler in this that does make it bad. It doesn't really sit quite right. And I felt like this movie was like 2.5 hours long. Most of the time when we watch these films, like you get kind of sucked into them. And they only have run times of like 69, 71 minutes.
I was like, Frankenstein was like that. We're in so abruptly. Because it's like, it's ramping up really good, and then it, boom, done. That's a movie that probably actually could have gotten a little bit more runtime and made it. The first Frankenstein felt perfectly well-paced throughout the whole thing. Bride of Frankenstein was pretty good, well-paced. Visible Man was well. They did a really good job of using that time constraint really effectively.
Yeah. Oh, so you're talking about Dracula, though. The one that was like abrupt ending. You said Frankenstein.
Dracula was abrupt ending. All the rest of them weren't as abrupt an ending.
Yeah.
But they used the time. They were still all 71. Like, they just got better at utilizing their time. This one got longer and feels long. Like, the only one of the other ones I thought could have benefited from a longer runtime was Dracula. All the other ones did a really good job of using their time. This one, I don't know what happened. Like, they just... Like we talked about before, like there were like more scenes and stuff. Some of these films got more time that was cut.
Yeah.
This one feels like they should have cut what they weren't cutting out of the other films.
Or it feels like they cut out like the interesting parts that tied the different scenes together.
Maybe. Yeah, they cut out the wrong stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know what it is. It's just like
it was rough. There's like these long, boring moments. The town, like the town doesn't have like the mob mentality they had from the first one where they're chasing the monster.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't have like the psychological thriller aspects of the second one where Frankenstein's like mixed between his old life and his new life and he's being sucked back in.
Yeah.
This one just feels a little forced. Like the son was interesting. Like his idea of like he idolized his father and his work.
Right.
But it gets muddled in all of this stuff. It just gets lost.
It does. See, the thing is, like, I agree with you, like, the pacing is really bad, but I think that another aspect to this pacing issue is this film had the most parts in it that could have been really well done and really interesting. This film has the most things that are just kind of, like, established and then left hanging.
Yes.
Like, if you think about it, there's so many moving parts, there's so many different things that could be done, and then they choose to, like, focus on, like, really bland things that are going on.
Yes.
Like, it has...
Well, the monster psychology is really interesting to me. The other two films do a really good job of showing his confusion between being good and evil. Like, he's on the... Like, he's not fully... The monster himself sees himself as a monster and doesn't like he tries to kill himself in the second one to save because he thinks he should be dead. In this one, it's like he's stuck on the fence. But in every film, they just like mercilessly kill the monster without ever having a resolution that gives him. It's like they toy with the idea of him being redeemable, but then don't do it. They just chuck him out as a monster in the end.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point now where it's become a trope and it's almost kind of old. Like at some point, I kind of like somebody to be like, maybe the monster isn't the problem. Maybe it's us. Cause like in the first one, he's just confused and new.
Yeah.
And the second one, he's kind of under control of like, he wants
Latoris. Yeah.
Cause he wants something and he does what he's told because he has something he needs. And this one, he's literally just a straight servant of Igor. So it's just, he's like devolving while losing his character development. It's a little sad to watch that and not have anything come of it.
Yeah. So back to my point. This film has a lot of stuff in it that they kind of left hanging. Like the town is more established as a town. It's in a new era, so it's like more of a modern era. There's a lot more characters that are actually really active in the town that they created. Like they have this council of elders, they have the burgermeister, they have the medical examiner and the inspector, obviously, and all of it, the police forces and stuff. And there's a few scenes where they have the elders meeting and they have this whole thing going on with the elders and Igor, namely the fact that Igor was accidentally confirmed dead when he was not, in fact. His neck was broken, but he still was alive. So they have this whole like subplot though where literally he's using the monster to try to kill off the jury that sent him to be hung. And it feels like some of the, like, yes, he does succeed in like killing everybody on that council, but it kind of feels at the same time that there was a lot of stuff just left. There's a lot of potential left on the table there when it came to that subplot. Also, how did the inspector not put two and two together and be like, the people who put Igor...
Well, he recognized the pattern.
Yeah.
He just couldn't get... The problem is he had a perfect alibi. So he's like, he figured he's working with someone. He just couldn't think. That was the problem. Like, he was on it. Like, he was actually a really good inspector. He wasn't the incompetent inspector trope. Like, a lot of the, like, Invisible Man, a lot of the other ones, the inspectors were kind of incompetent or wouldn't believe what was going on.
Yeah, they're played off a laugh.
This inspector is very much, he knows something's going on. He sees the patterns. He's just trying to get proof of it. And he can't get Igor because he's got a perfect alibi. So he's trying to figure out how he's doing it.
Yeah.
And he figures it out.
Yeah, I guess it's just like I said, this film just with the pacing the way that it is, there's so many bland scenes, there's so many weird choices that they made, and there's so much. It's like this film had so much more potential than a lot of the other films established. It felt more fleshed out. It felt more open. It felt like there was a lot of stuff that they could have done just world-wise.
It feels closer to more modern films where there's longer plots and longer. Because that's one of the things a lot of the other films didn't have was subplots. The main plot, and that's it. This one did have subplots. And this is the first one we've watched that really... I think The Werewolf London kind of tried to do it, but didn't do it very well. This one really does subplots well. Gives you lots of different character development of backing around characters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What about Ugly? You said you had a really good one.
Oh, yes. The ugly in this film is like 100% apparent from the first shot until the last shot. The set design, the direction that they went art-wise with the set design is really, really bad.
They did surreal, like everything's
like surreal.
Everything's twisted, and so the house that they're in, the staircase is like twisted and janky, and the hallways are like all crooked and angled.
It looks like it belongs in a cartoon. It also kind of just looks like Tim Burton went back in time.
Yes.
And
it looks a lot like a Tim Burton.
It's probably where he got his style from, actually, was watching these horror films.
That actually would make a lot of sense.
So
this one especially.
Yeah, this one's like 100%. It looks kind of Tim Burton-esque. Obviously, it's not because Tim Burton wasn't alive yet, I don't think.
Yes, but exactly. But no, I get you there. Yeah, the set pieces were off-putting. It looked like it was meant to be jarring and autistic, but the artistic kind of falls short in this style of film when you already have other films established in it.
Yeah.
And so it just felt off-putting, and it kind of made it detract from the original. When you have Karloff playing the monster again.
Yeah, you have the original monster, and then on top of that, they had a portrait of the original actor.
Yeah.
I forget his name, Clive. I think his first name's Clive.
But yeah, it kind of fails to make that connection when you do that.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really weird about the set design too is they pull into the train station and the entire town is called Frankenstein. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Like everything is called Frankenstein, but they want to not be associated with the name. They don't want to be the town associated with Frankenstein's monster and this whole legacy. It's just like, then why did you name your town Frankenstein.
Well, he said they were the barons of the town for 700 years, so it's
Yeah.
named after the Frankenstein. Either the town is named after the families of the town. Either way, they're not, and that's why they literally say the town has been like Persian stuff. Like no people have left. Nobody wants to do business with them or work with them anymore. They feel isolated. And he said, well, we will make a change the name. It's like, doesn't matter. The name, that's kind of how they felt. Like we could change the name of the town, but it won't matter. Like then we'll just be the town who used to be Frankenstein who changed their name because of the monster. They kind of feel trapped, which is an interesting like psychological point, but they don't do very much with it.
Yeah, they don't. But really like the whole set design is really off-putting because they have like the gate. They have a gate that leads to Frankenstein's castle and laboratory with like a cracked window that Igor is always playing his thing. Like I don't even know what kind of music.
It's a horn of some kind.
Yeah, it's like a woodwind horn that's made out of like a pine cone and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like they have that set piece and then they have the weird building in the middle of town. And then all like the entire village is built, but it doesn't have the same feel as the original. Like the original town was amazing.
The first two
the films,
town feels fleshed out and real.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
this one it feels like they built it out of paper mache.
Yeah, and then it's like you had a continuity between the first film and the second film. They reused different little set pieces. They reused different designs and things like that. And then this one has a complete tonal shift in regards to the art style and the build style and the sets. And it no longer really, you cannot at all identify the first two films with the style of this third film. The architecture is entirely different. The stair, like you mentioned, the staircase is wonky. But also like they have like the dining room with the two overarching fireplaces. All the rooms are janky. The laboratory, I hated the laboratory. The fact that one, it's right across, like it's across the way from the castle proper, and then like walking up to the castle, it has this like specific design to it that doesn't really match, and then the laboratory is blown up because that happened in the second film, but it looks entirely different. It's not even like the tower; it's a dome thing.
Yeah, that was really weird.
There's nothing that matches tonally. But then, like when the peasants are rioting and they walk up to the gate, if you like, it's very quick. But if you glimpse in the background, it shows the castle, and the castle looks like it did in the first two films. So it's not like the design of the original castle was lost. They just decided not to continue on with it.
It's really confusing. It almost looked like they were living in the castle where the laboratory was at, but the laboratory was in the castle. I don't know. They retconned a little bit in a weird way, maybe to make it flow better, but the problem is that it doesn't fix anything. Yeah, it's rough.
They should have rebuilt
maybe.
Yeah, they should have rebuilt the set or at least gone with a similar tone. The drasticness of the change is just ugly.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good. It's not appealing, and it pulls you out of the film immediately. Immediately and throughout the film, I was just like, this is ugly. It's dysfunctional. It's disjointed. It looks fake. It feels fake, and not in a fun way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ugly for me.
For me, the ugly is actually the runtime. I feel like they finally something happened in Hollywood between the last one and this one, where films, because every film was like 70 minutes, like exactly, which I'm guessing was like the theater time they had.
Probably.
At some point, the time that movies ran in theaters must have increased, because this one is 30 minutes longer than that. And I feel like the runtime increased in theaters, and so they just didn't cut anything.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're like, oh, well, now that we don't have to cut anything, we're just not going to. And it hurts the film significantly. So that's my ugly. Yours is pretty, so mine, I'm kind of to stick to like specifically just because that feels really strongly like it was a thing of the time that really caused that issue. I feel like yours is too. Like they had waited so long to do this one that
I mean, it was only 7 years between the first Frankenstein in this one, and I think the Bride of Frankenstein was 35, wasn't it? 35 or 36?
It was 33, I thought. I thought it was...
No, that's The Mummy. The Mummy came out, and... No, that's 32. Invisible Man was 33.
So maybe it was closer to this one.
Bride of Frankenstein was either 34 or 35.
But even the second one, there was some issues with the castle. I wonder if they just struggled to, like, get the scenes exactly right, or...
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's either way, that mixed with the really weird choices of what to keep create a very chaotic mess.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do my iconic.
Okay.
For me, honestly, I'm gonna go with Bela Lugosi's Igor. It's just chef's kiss. Like,
and it's such a different character than Dracula. Like, if you didn't know it was Bela Lugosi, you'd be like, it's a completely different.
No, he's like, well, Dracula's like this smooth, suave, charismatic trickster who shows his true nature at when he's later at night. This character is like conniving, and he's weak and literally broken. Like, his neck is actually broken, and he's kinked, and he can't quite function, but he's manipulative and clever, and he's got Frankenstein on a leash doing his bidding, and the monster. So he's got Frankenstein doing his bidding, he's got the monster doing his bidding. Like, he's just like he's in charge of everything, which is not. I always wondered what the initiation of Igor's character was, because I have known for a long time that the Igor that's often portrayed does not quite match what was originally created. So that's where it came from. This Igor is different than they always have. Igor as the pull the lever guy. Yeah, Igor is the servant. He's a stand-in for the hunchback that the original Frankenstein had, when he's actually just this crooked, clever monster it's almost the who's the real monster scenario.
Yeah, but he is 100% the monster.
Yes.
He just uses
He
just uses the naivety of the creature.
Yep, and the creature gets killed for it, and it's really just that him and his dynamic between him and the monster and the other character, all the other characters he interacts with. Just when he's playing as a informant for the inspector, but he's actually one. So it's like they're using each other, and then the inspector knows he's in on it, but he can't prove it, and Igor's like getting away with it. It's just really, really good.
Yeah,
especially the way he interacts with everyone. It's just wonderful. So that was my iconic there.
Okay, iconic.
Oh, and the playing of the flute, and literally playing the song that is played in all the other films.
Right.
He's actually just playing it, so it becomes meta, like really suddenly, is kind of fun, and just gives you a little bit of a nod to like where it originates from. So that was it. I'm done.
Okay, iconic. I mean, Boris Karloff, always iconic. The way that he portrays the monster, I think, is just, it's spot on. He does a really great job embodying this character.
This like very stiff movement. He's so believable. The way he moves just feels so desperate. Like he's barely really in control of himself.
Well, and also just like his face, his facial expressions.
The sounds he makes.
Yeah, the sounds.
The only one he's ever talked in is the second one, and even then it's very little. And the first and third one, it's all just grunts and motions, and you can tell when he looks in the mirror and he doesn't like the way he doesn't like himself. And it's not the way he looks specifically, it's the way that he mimics his insides matches outsides. Like, I'm ugly and grotesque and brutal and cruel and mean, and I hate myself, and I'm horrible, and look at us together. That whole scene is completely no dialogue from him at all. And from Frankenstein, there's no dialogue between the two of them, and you completely understand what's going on. He's comparing them side by side to each other without anything said.
Yeah. No, So I mean, that's kind of like I do the monsters every time, kind of as like the iconic part. But it really is one of those things where it's like Boris Karloff just embodies this character, and the character, as a result, really lifts the film. Like, it's very well done.
I'm concerned to see if one of them doesn't have him in it, because that's three of them so far that have.
I think this is the last one with Boris Karloff as the monster. I think it is. Because 3 or 4 people have played Frankenstein's monster in like the Universal monster movies.
Gotcha.
So I think this might be the last one that Boris Karloff is the monster.
Which is really sad, because he just does such a good job. Well, maybe the other ones will do well too. I don't know, but he embodies that character.
Yeah.
And seeing him and Bela Lugosi in the same film together was really fun.
That was fun. Like seeing them, it's 2 iconic actors. Granted, it's not, Bela Lugosi's Dracula interacting with Frankenstein, but it's still cool to see the 2 of them together. So I would just have to say that the monsters are portrayed very, very well in this film. All the other guys were like well done, don't get me wrong, but I don't even think that they go to the level of like iconic.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So, although like it's really clear that Young Frankenstein gets a lot of its inspiration from this film. A lot of the characters and jokes and stuff like that come off the heels of this film specifically.
All right, so what about how would we? Okay, so this one's interesting for me, because cleaning this up for the time it was made, honestly, what I would have done is just cleaned up the uglies.
Yeah.
You just take out the 2 uglies that we mentioned, and you basically fix it. Like, even the bad, like some of the pacing stuff, fixed by those 2 things.
Yeah, if you cut time to make it to where you kind of like make it like lean and mean, you don't have as much fluff. It wouldn't feel as long. It wouldn't feel as dry and boring at times. And the other thing is that if the set design matched the other 2, yeah, I would say that you have a very, very solid film, and both of those things are definitely accomplishable. Yeah. Which is part of the reason that those uglies are so frustrating.
Yeah,
is because they're accomplishable. It was a choice. It was an active choice.
The house hits me so hard. I kind of understand what they were kind of going for. They were trying to make the house feel uneasy, like and it's an art form. You're making the audience feel uneasy in the home. The problem is, a lot of the time, it's hard. It makes it less uneasy and just weird. Like, it's not. I don't feel uncomfortable in this house. I'm like, who designed this place? Like, what psychopath put this house together? It doesn't. It does feel like Tim Burton before Tim Burton, but Tim Burton did it to a degree where he does this thing where it's always slightly off.
Yeah,
it's never like horribly mouth. It's like
it's slightly
everything
off,
everything is functional but slightly off. This was just like in your face, twisted, and it didn't really match the vibe that we got from the other 2, because the other 2 was like the world around it is normal. The monster is the standout. The house standing out, the castle standing out was kind of weird. Like, they made the castle a character in the film by doing that, and it doesn't really match the vibe that anything else had.
Yeah.
So that was for me. You just fix those 2 things, and boom, it's just like, boom, you got a better film.
Yeah. Also, like, I'd get rid of the climax the way that it was. The thing I've noticed with the Frankenstein films so far is that the climax, the way that it resolves, and they get rid of the monster, has escalated each time to make it more permanent. As if they're like emphasizing this is the last one.
Well, it's like a Jason film. Like, they always the deaths get more brutal, so he definitely can't come back.
Yeah, exactly. Like, think about it. It went from burning down in the windmill to a literal explosion
and building falling on him,
and the entire stone building crumbling on him. To now he melted in a 800-degree sulfur pit.
Yes.
So it's just one of those things, like, clean up the climax a little bit. Just be like, these films are popular enough. We've made 3 so far. Make it so that it's like, yes, this could be the end, and we can accept it to be the end, but we don't have to make some ridiculous excuse for him to reappear necessarily. I'd say clean that up a little bit. One thing about the set design again. I just kind of thought about this. You mentioned it's supposed to be like uneasy. Maybe this is like the beginning of like camera tricks. Before they decided to manipulate the camera to do the trick, they were like, let's make the set weird to do the off-putting feeling. Instead, before they discovered that like literally just taking your camera and putting it 45 degrees to the left or to the right accomplishes that uneasy feeling.
Well, that's kind of what in some of the early ones, the way they made the setting uneasy was by focusing hard on the monster.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition of the monster to their surroundings was what made it jarring. Mm-hmm. And this one, I guess they felt that wasn't good enough anymore, so they made the scenery all weird too, which accomplishes the effect of making you uncomfortable for the wrong reasons. It doesn't make you feel like you don't belong there. It just makes you feel kind of uneasy. It doesn't make you feel like, oh man, this place is haunted or dangerous. It's like, oh, this place just looks icky. Like I don't like it. And so I don't feel uneasy the right way, like you do with a slight camera tilt or making shapes slightly off. Like if the castle had slight weirdness to it, it would have done the same effect. But they exaggerated it so much that it just stands out as odd, especially if this was the only film in the Frankenstein series or the first one, it probably would have worked because it would have established the castle that way with the uneasiness to it. But they don't, and then they just suddenly do it. The third one in is odd.
Yeah, especially when the second one meets the tone of the first one very well. It's a different set and they make different changes, but it still feels like, they just moved out of town a little farther. They moved to their summer estate or whatever. Like, you can make excuses for that. This one, they're like, no, all the stuff happened here. This is the laboratory. That's
kind of the same thing that I had with the Daughter of Dracula. Where like, this is where this was at. I was like, this is an entirely different set. What about for modern audiences? I had a really good idea, I think, for this one that I was going to throw out, and then I was going to let you handle it from there.
Yeah, go for it.
But the first thing that I thought about for this one was to make the Frankenstein character more sympathetic. Because in every one of these, Frankenstein monster is like, you can tell he's conflicted, but he just gets brutally like axed, like without unceremoniously, without any, because it's like they're playing with their psychology, but like that's not what these audiences want. Kick him in the can into the garbage pit.
Yeah, swing down on the rope like you're freaking Tarzan and kick him into the sulfur pit. Yeah,
I would like to actually. I would take this film because, like, assuming that you had two before this, where the monster like is there's obviously cues of misunderstandings. Let this be the one when it's the son of Frankenstein that finally sees that maybe this monster isn't what we think. Like they catch that he even says like he obeys me. I tell him what to do and he just does it. Like he's kind of brain dead now, or he's given up, or he's damaged. Which is exactly what Frankenstein says. Frankenstein says, hey, he's still not completely healed, and he used to be able to talk, and now he can't, and he's just kind of subservient to Igor. That's all Igor wanted, was to use him as a tool, which was a really clever plot, but it actually been really cool. What I would have done is made it so that Frankenstein's son is trying to, actually pushes forward to try to heal him. And that's where Igor and him get fight. You can still have it where he has the epic death in the end because they're just unable to quite get to him in time. But you can see like a spark of hope that there's actually something to him. Because right now it's just become a Jason character where he's just a monster that you just kill every movie.
And then he shows back up.
Yeah. But I would like to see it where some of that sympathy starts to come out and empathy. And maybe the Son of Frankenstein is where it starts, and then you can move on with the next one that comes up. He's actually starting to open up and become normalized, or at least see some humanity in himself.
Yeah,
it just always teases it but never goes anywhere. That was my big one.
Okay. Here's how I'd incorporate that. We're assuming that the first two films happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically, like the way we kind of rewrote, which the first one we left alone and we just updated.
Yeah, for the most part, we just updated it.
And the second one, we cleaned up some of the weird side plots. But for the most part, the first two films, we would leave mostly alone and just give a little more to them.
Yeah. Okay, so I would... Okay, I would show Frankenstein coming back into town, but later. I would have more of a prequel, like a prologue scene that shows Igor.
Yeah, they kind of did it as super short and confusing.
Yeah, so I would take the time to just like show like Igor being hung and then him surviving. Like maybe they put him in a tomb or something like that, or they throw him.
Showing Igor's backstory would have been really cool.
Yeah, showing a little bit of his backstory and then him like wandering around to the accursed land, the cursed area of Frankenstein's castle, because it's been abandoned. You know, Henry died, and ever since then, people have just gone up there, and it's been closed off from the town because people are vandalizing it. I would show the gate like vandalized and like tilted, and maybe people walk by it and spit on something.
Yeah,
and Igor, still injured, like gimps into the area. And what he finds when he tries to like seek shelter and food or something like that is he ends up in the lab, and we have him find that Frankenstein is alive, but he's like, it's clear that his head is like worse off than it is.
Yeah.
So there's clearly more cuts. There's more scarring. Maybe his hair's like missing a little bit, or something's going on. Like you can tell that his head's been severely damaged. I would have like a little hint of the Bride of Frankenstein, like maybe her hair shows from the back, in the background, like under the rubble, you can kind of see her hair coming out a little bit. That's just me. I think that'd be.
It would have been nice to have a callback to the Bride of Frankenstein, because that that doesn't really get a lot of anything to it. It just kind of ends unceremoniously without anything happening there, and it would have been nice to address it at least.
Yeah, I would have Frankenstein maybe like barely awake, like he wakes up a little bit and then he kind of falls back asleep, wakes up a little bit and falls back asleep, and then I would have Wolf. I would change his name from Wolf to something like Walt or something like that. Walter.
Walt.
I joked. He looks kind of like Walt Disney, but I would change his name to something else, like Walter.
Wolf Disney.
Instead of Wolf. He would appear and they would go through most of the stuff where he's like, oh, I'm actually like morbidly curious about my father's research, and it's a shame that it didn't really work out as well as it would. I wish I could have seen what my father had done and things like that. Like hinted that a little bit more, not to the point of like the long monologue in the train, but just one of those things where like people come into town and he's like, I would think that people would be more interested in this. They would want to know more about this. It seems to have like people just
focus
hate
more
the
on his
idea
curiosity than like his slight insanity.
Like his slight instead of that. So we proceed on, and like as he's talking more and more about this, maybe Igor shows up through town and things like that. And he notices that, the castle's more active, and he starts asking questions, and the townsfolk are like, oh, that kid, he's just crazy. He sounds like he's going to start the same thing that his dad did. He's talking about how great this experiment was, and he's curious about how it would have started, or what he would have done in the situation, whatever it is, like establish that. And then Igor sees his opportunity. I can get Frankenstein to be alive, and also I would establish that like the town wants to kill Igor because he was convicted of a crime, and he's getting off on a very, very dumb technicality because he was declared dead.
So he technically served his sentence.
Yeah, so technically he served his sentence, but the town hates him.
I like that. Just to chime in real quick, I really like the idea that you have like where like Frankenstein monster wouldn't respond, because I actually like the idea of the murders don't happen until not even the first one, because they comes in this one with the murders already happening. It'd be great if Frankenstein's like brings him back and then Igor starts using him. Like that's the beginning. Like that scene where he's like, oh, he's perfect just this way, I can use him this way, that's where it starts.
Yeah. And so
Frankenstein keeps it quiet because he doesn't want to be implicated.
yeah, so Igor shows him Frankenstein in the lab and stuff like that, and Frankenstein's like, okay, I'll rebuild the lab and I'll fix the monster, I'll make him better, I'll fix his brain too, and he'll be as my father intended him to be, kind of thing. But then right after Frankenstein gets conscious, Igor starts like talking to him and things like that. We get a couple of flashbacks from Frankenstein's point of view, where the people who have always been nice to him have let him right. They've wanted him to be like the little girl was nice to him until he threw her in, and the old man, the blind old man, was super nice to him and things like that. So he starts kind of seeing Igor in this role because he's seen him the most, and he seems to be taking care of him. He brought him help. He brought him a doctor that he doesn't recognize as Frankenstein's son, obviously. And right after he gets healed, the Frankenstein's like, okay, now I'm going to start working on his brain. I'm going to start kind of altering him a little bit. There's legends that he can talk and things like that. So there's something clearly wrong. There's something really wrong with him.
Right.
That he's not quite understanding what's going on. And then Igor sees his opportunity. He starts sending out Frankenstein at night to murder, and it's not really clear that's Frankenstein's monster necessarily doing it. It might be Igor, it might be somebody else, but then things start lining up. The inspector begins to show up more prominently and suspecting Frankenstein of doing this, not Igor. Igor's just there. He's just benefiting from
what would have been
on.
clever too if Igor had also killed people that weren't on his jury as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the members of his jury get killed, but not just them.
Mm-hmm. So like as things like progress and more we start revealing that Igor's actually manipulating Frankenstein's monster. He's not just like taking care of him and just like some guy who's like, oh, I have a second opportunity at life, I want to give him the second opportunity of life. But he's like, no, I'm going to use him to kill while I set up my own alibis, and I give him the training, like all the stuff necessary to do the killings and things like that. So it could be Dr. Frankenstein doing it. Could be.
I would really like to add a little bit to that and have it so that Igor, his manipulations aren't clear, where he acts subservient, like we expect him to be, because that like the modern aspect of Igor would be like, yes, I'll do whatever you say, and then then it turns out the whole time he's been manipulating events. He's the mastermind. He's tricked everyone, and he's
the one that's like making sure that the readings aren't right. He's the one that makes sure that Frankenstein's brain isn't fully healed. He's doing all of these different things, but Frankenstein doesn't see it. Yeah,
it's like sabotage, but Frankenstein doesn't see it because in this one it's really clear that Igor's like in charge, like he's in control. And as interesting as that was for me, just because that's a different trope of what the Igor character is like from what I've used to in more modern times. At the time of the film, it was like both interesting to me and disappointing at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, this is a really interesting twist on this character, except for it's the earlier version, so obviously it's the original, but it's not what I'm used to when seeing the Igor character.
Yeah.
Because even like Van Helsing did it where like he was subservient but sneaky and conniving a little bit. I would have liked to have seen it where he was like acts fully subservient and then it turns out it was him. Yeah. That's just kind of a me thing. Like I would have liked to see that. That for modern, I think that would work better.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is that eventually, like as things start clicking, the inspector's starting to figure things out, but he's pointing towards Frankenstein, the doctor, because he's like, you're just following in your father's footsteps kind of thing. And so eventually it clicks for the doctor, and he's like, no, it's Igor. Igor's behind this whole thing. And we don't we get the stereotypical, he shows up in the thing, and he's like, I knew it was you all along. Like he sees him like messing with the monster. Like I knew it was you all along, and then it like zooms over and it's Igor. And Igor tries to kill him. But Dr. Frankenstein's prepared and he shoots him and he kills him. But now he has an issue. Igor's dead. he can't confess to his crime, and nobody's going to believe Dr.
And
Frankenstein.
not only can he not confess, but now no one's controlling the monster anymore.
Well, that too. And so the monster's confused, and maybe he goes after Frankenstein. And, you have this whole different thing that's going to go on. But eventually the inspector shows up, and he's like, I knew it. You brought back the monster, blah, blah, blah. He does this whole thing. He's like, we need to kill the monster, like put the monster down. And we have the moment where Dr. Frankenstein stands between the mob and Frankenstein's monster and goes, no, you don't understand. He's been manipulated. He's been used and abused by Igor. Igor's corrupted him, and eventually though it's like an emotional scene, and the crowd overwhelms him, and we see Frankenstein being dragged away into the distance, presumably to be burned or thrown into a pit or whatever. And we leave it with the monster like crying in the distance, and Frankenstein just being like, no, you don't understand, or something. And that's how you...
Not bad. I like it.
Because then that leaves it open to, like, he could have escaped. They could have just thrown him in jail.
It was like kind of like the first Frankenstein film, where like he's just laying in bed, and it makes it clear like he's alive, but it doesn't really make it clear if he's gonna make it or not.
Yeah.
So they leave it open, and then the second one they had, of course, he did make it. But that was I like your version of it. It's great.
But yeah. All right. That's the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic of Son of Frankenstein. We talked a little bit about what we would do in the time that it was made, 1938, and what we would do to release it to a modern audience. So yeah, we've done everything that we have set out to do. DJ, we have accomplished the mission. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and watching this discussion podcast thing about these films. We're having so much fun doing this series. It's always a pleasure to be able to not just watch the films, but discuss them and talk about them, let them air out a little bit. There's so much in these films that's just so enjoyable. Just to do a quick plug like we usually do, we are watching the Universal 100th anniversary collection Blu-ray set. If you want to follow along with what we're doing, that is how we are watching these films, and that's the version of the films that we are discussing.
It mostly focuses on the iconic monsters. It skips a few of the films that are considered the monster series, but none of the ones that are, super important.
Yeah.
The Black Cat.
The Raven.
The Raven.
And the Raven. That has the same actors in it, but it's like 20 years apart. Yeah.
Don't think about it too much.
Don't think about it too much. Anyway, yeah, so thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. If you like this video, please leave a like and let us know in the comments what you think of not just Son of Frankenstein. Sorry, it is late. So, yeah, let us know in the comments what you guys think. Otherwise, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so that you can get more content like this. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook at Entertainment Rebooted, at X at Exposition Cycle. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.